His hands don't shake because they're weak. They tremble with the weight of courage. Welcome to Stallone Unleashed. Let's uncover what really happened. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that slips by unnoticed, tucked between the ambition of Monday and the promise of the weekend. In a sun-drenched corner of Pasadena, a cherished independent bookstore named Pages and Prose was an oasis of calm. The air smelled of old paper, binding glue, and freshly brewed coffee from the small cafe in the back. Sunlight slanted through the large front window, illuminating dancing dust motes and casting a warm glow on the polished wooden floors. It was in this sanctuary that Sylvester Stallone sought a few hours of quiet refuge. Dressed in a simple dark polo shirt and comfortable slacks, he moved through the aisles with the silent, purposeful grace of a man completely at ease with himself, a far cry from the explosive characters that had defined his career. He was in the history section, his fingers tracing the spines of thick biographies and military chronicles, lost in the stories of the past. It was here that he first noticed the other man. He was an elderly gentleman, impeccably dressed in a tweed blazer and neatly pressed trousers. He stood with the ramrod straight posture of a man who had known a lifetime of discipline, yet his hands betrayed him. They trembled with a fine, persistent tremor, making it difficult for him to hold the heavy book he was examining. The contrast between his ironclad bearing and his quivering hands was profound and moving. The third element of this impending human drama entered in a whirlwind of youthful energy. A young mother, Sarah, was trying to navigate the quiet aisles with her 5-year-old son, Leo, a boy with bright, curious eyes and a voice that hadn't yet learned the concept of indoor volume. "Mommy, can I get a book about dinosaurs? A big one? With a T-Rex?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the hushed space. Sarah, with a gentle smile, tried to quiet him, her gestures loving but firm. The initial scene was a perfect tableau of peaceful, everyday life. The quiet celebrity, the dignified old soldier, the loving mother, and the inquisitive child, all moving in their own orbits, unaware that their paths were about to converge in a moment of unexpected, life-altering power. The shift occurred with the startling clarity of a bell ringing in a silent church. Leo, having momentarily lost interest in dinosaurs, caught sight of the elderly gentleman. Children, in their unfiltered innocence, are the world's most acute observers. Leo's gaze fixed on the man's trembling hands. He tilted his head, his brow furrowing in genuine, unadulterated curiosity. He tugged on his mother's sleeve, and without malice, without judgment, but with the full force of a 5-year-old's need to understand the world, he pointed and asked the question that would hang in the air like a held breath. "Mommy," he said, his voice carrying across the aisle, "why does that grandpa shake like that?" The words, so innocent in their intention, landed with the force of a physical blow. The quiet hum of the bookstore seemed to stop. Sarah's face, which had been soft with maternal affection, instantly flushed a deep, panicked red. A wave of pure, unadulterated horror washed over her features. In that moment, she saw not her son's curiosity, but a public indictment of her parenting, a social catastrophe unfolding in the history section. Her immediate instinct was to smother the sound, to erase the question. "Leo, she hissed, her voice a sharp, frantic whisper. She knelt down, her hands gripping his small shoulders. "We don't point. We don't ask things like that. That's rude." The elderly gentleman, who the world would later come to know as retired General James Miller, flinched as if he'd been struck. His shoulders, once so straight, slumped forward. The book he was holding slipped from his trembling fingers, falling to the carpeted floor with a soft, heavy thud. He didn't bend to pick it up. He simply stared at the floor, his face a mask of deep, weary hurt. He wanted to be invisible. Stallone, who had been observing from a few feet away, saw the entire sequence unfold. He saw the child's honest question, the mother's panicked shame, and the old soldier's quiet devastation. A subtle but profound change came over his own expression. The relaxed, contemplative look was gone, replaced by one of sharp, focused intensity. His jaw tightened. The inciting incident had happened, and the calm of pages and prose had been shattered, not by a shout, but by a child's simple, devastating question. The tension in the aisle began to escalate, spiraling outward from the mother's frantic attempts to contain the situation. Sarah, mortified, stood up and tried to pull Leo away, her grip on his hand now painfully tight. "Come on, we're leaving," she muttered, her eyes darting around to see who had witnessed her shame. Her panicked reaction was a feedback loop. Her embarrassment made the situation more noticeable, which in turn deepened her embarrassment. General Miller, meanwhile, made a move to retreat. He took a half-step back, intending to turn and walk away, to simply vanish from the scene of his unintended humiliation. He looked like a man who had faced down enemy fire, but was now being routed by the innocent question of a child and the well-intentioned panic of a mother. The other patrons in the vicinity, who had previously been engrossed in their books, were now acutely aware of the drama. They pretended to read, their eyes fixed on pages they weren't seeing. They were witnesses, and their collective, uncomfortable silence only amplified the tension. It was a moment thick with unspoken social contracts being violated, a vortex of shame, hurt, and awkwardness. Sarah, seeing the general's retreat, made things worse. In a desperate bid to apologize, she stepped toward him, pulling a reluctant Leo with her. "Sir, I am so sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling. "He's only 5, he doesn't understand. I'm so sorry if he offended you." Her apology, born of a good heart, had the opposite effect. By framing her son's question as an offense, she validated the idea that the general's condition was something shameful, something to be apologized for. It reinforced the very stigma that had caused him to flinch in the first place. Stallone saw it all. He saw the mother digging a deeper hole with every word. He saw the child looking utterly confused, now feeling like he had done something terribly wrong for simply asking a question. And he saw the general, a man of immense dignity, being treated like a fragile, pitiable object. The actor's hands, which had been loosely holding a book, closed into gentle fists at his sides. He knew this moment could not be allowed to end this way. It could not conclude with a shamed child, a mortified mother, and a humiliated hero. He took a quiet, deep breath. The time for observation was over. The situation was spiraling toward a conclusion of misery for all involved. Sarah's frantic apologies only served to draw more attention, her panicked energy making the quiet general shrink even further into himself. "It's quite all right," General Miller finally managed to say, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes fixed on the floor. He just wanted it to be over. He was a man accustomed to command, to respect, and this moment of being the center of pitying attention was a profound torture. Sarah, sensing his desire to flee, tugged on Leo's arm one last time. "Just say you're sorry, Leo," she pleaded, her voice cracking. But Leo was no longer looking at the general. He was looking at his mother's frantic face, tears welling in his own eyes, utterly bewildered as to why his simple question had caused so much pain. This was the point of no return. A child's natural curiosity was about to be stamped out and replaced with shame. A man's invisible wounds were being salted by misplaced kindness. It was a tragedy of manners, a collision of good intentions and painful reality. And that is when Sylvester Stallone made a stand. He placed the heavy history book he was holding back on the shelf with a soft, definitive click. The sound was quiet, but in the tense silence, it seemed to command attention. He took 2 steps forward, not toward the mother or the general, but directly into the center of the small, charged space they occupied. He didn't address the adults. His focus was entirely on the child. He bent down, not just from the waist, but all the way down, kneeling on one knee, so that he was perfectly eye level with the 5-year-old boy. The action was so unexpected, so full of grace and humility, that it instantly broke the frantic, awkward rhythm of the moment. The entire aisle fell still. Sarah stopped pulling. The general stopped retreating. The onlookers stopped pretending to read. Stallone looked into Leo's wide, tearful eyes and gave him a small, reassuring smile. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, gentle rumble, filled with a warmth that seemed to absorb all the tension in the air. "That," he said, his voice soft but clear, "is a very, very good question." The moment Stallone knelt and validated the boy's question, the frantic energy in the aisle evaporated, replaced by a profound, anticipatory stillness. He had, with a single gesture and a single sentence, completely reframed the situation. This was no longer a moment of social transgression. It was a teachable moment, and a masterclass was about to begin. Leo, stunned to be addressed by this calm, kind stranger, sniffled and wiped his eyes. "It is," he asked in a small voice. "It's one of the best questions you can ask," Stallone affirmed, his gaze never leaving the boy's face. "Because it means you're paying attention. It means you want to understand." He then glanced up for a fraction of a second, not at the mother, but at the general, a look of deep respect passing between them before his attention returned to the child. "You see," Stallone began, leaning in conspiratorially, as if sharing a great secret. "Your eyes are sharp. You notice that the general's hands have a story to tell." The climax of the confrontation was not a rebuke, but an explanation. It was a quiet, powerful act of translation. "A long time ago," Stallone continued, his voice painting a vivid picture, "that man, the general, was a very brave soldier. He did very important work to keep people like you and your mommy and me safe. He was a hero." Leo's eyes grew wider, his tears forgotten, replaced by a look of awe. "And when you're a hero like that, you live a very big life. Your body, your hands, your heart, they have to hold all of the memories of that big life. All the times he was brave, all the loud noises he had to ignore, all the heavy things he had to carry for other people." Stallone paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "His hands don't shake because they're weak," he said, his voice dropping slightly, filled with a profound sense of reverence. "They shake because they're full. They're full of all that courage. It's just spilling out a little. It's like a medal you can see." Stallone's quiet, powerful explanation had fundamentally transformed the atmosphere. Shame had been replaced by reverence, and awkwardness by awe. He had not just answered child's question. He had rewritten the narrative of a man's life in a way that a 5-year-old could understand, and in doing so, had given everyone in that aisle a powerful lesson in empathy. The moral high ground had been seized, not through condemnation, but through a profound act of compassionate storytelling. He then slowly rose from his knee, his movements deliberate and full of purpose. He turned to face General Miller, who was now standing straighter, the slump in his shoulders gone, his eyes no longer downcast, but looking directly at Stallone, glistening with an emotion that was not hurt, but a deep, profound gratitude. "General," Stallone said, his voice now carrying a tone of formal respect, "my name is Sylvester Stallone. It is a genuine honor to meet you." He extended his right hand. This was the definitive action. It was a gesture that said more than any speech could. He was not shying away from the tremor. He was reaching out to it, to the man, to the history it represented. For a moment, General Miller hesitated, looking down at his own trembling hand as if it were a foreign object. Then, taking a deep breath, he extended it. Stallone took the general's hand in his own, a firm, warm, and steady grip. He didn't rush the handshake. He held it for a moment, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of the man's sacrifice, a physical connection that bridged the gap between the observer and the observed. In that handshake, the tremor was not a flaw. It was a point of contact, a current of shared humanity. He then turned his warm gaze to Sarah, who was watching, tears now streaming silently down her face, but for a completely different reason. "You have a wonderful son," Stallone said to her gently. "He's got a good heart and a curious mind. Never let him be afraid to ask questions." This was his final act of grace, absolving the mother of her shame and reframing her son's action not as a mistake, but as a virtue. The handshake concluded, but the powerful moment it created lingered in the air. Stallone released the general's hand, but kept his respectful gaze on him. Arthur, for his part, looked as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. A small, dignified smile touched his lips for the first time. The man who had sought to become invisible was now the most revered person in the room. Sarah, the mother, let out a soft, shuddering sob, a release of all the panicked tension she had been holding. "Thank you," she whispered, the words directed at Stallone, but encompassing the entire, beautiful resolution. I didn't know what to say. "Sometimes, no one does," Stallone replied with gentle understanding. "But a good story is always a good place to start." He then did something that solidified the new, positive connection between the three of them. He knelt down again to Leo. "You know," he said, "the general here knows all about real heroes. I bet he could even help you find the best dinosaur book." Leo, now completely captivated, looked from Stallone to the general with unbridled excitement. "Really?" General Miller, stepping forward, his tremor seeming less pronounced in the wake of his restored dignity, cleared his throat. "As a matter of fact, I do," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. The T-Rex was the undisputed king of the late Cretaceous period, a formidable soldier in his own right. "Let's go have a look." As the old soldier and the young boy walked off together towards the children's section, a quiet, spontaneous ripple of applause broke out among the other patrons. It wasn't for the celebrity. It was for the moment. It was for the kindness, the wisdom, and the beautiful, unexpected healing they had all just witnessed. The bookstore manager approached Stallone, holding out a book. "Mr. Stallone," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is on the house." It was a copy of a famous military history. Stallone simply smiled, shook his head, and paid for his own book, a quiet refusal to accept a reward for an act of simple human decency. The story, as such stories do in the digital age, found its way out of the quiet bookstore and into the wider world. A literature student in the cafe, captivated by the unfolding drama, had discreetly filmed the entire interaction on her phone. She uploaded it not with a sensationalist headline, but with a simple, poignant one, "A lesson in honor and empathy in my local bookstore. We need more of this." The video was different from the usual viral content. It wasn't loud, confrontational, or angry. It was quiet, profound, and deeply moving. It spread like a gentle, warming fire. It was shared by parenting groups as a perfect example of how to talk to children about differences. Veterans organizations shared it, with thousands of comments from servicemen and women and their families, thanking Stallone for seeing past the tremor to the hero beneath. News outlets picked it up, not as a piece of celebrity gossip, but as a genuinely heartwarming story, a welcome antidote to the usual cycle of conflict and division. Commentators lauded Stallone's grace, his wisdom, and his ability to turn a moment of potential shame into a powerful tribute. The public fallout was overwhelmingly positive, a collective sigh of relief and admiration. The incident became a touchstone for discussions about the invisible wounds of service, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and the physical tolls that don't always involve visible scars. The bookstore, Pages and Prose, received an outpouring of support, with people from all over the country ordering books online, wanting to support a place where such a beautiful moment could happen. The focus was not on condemnation, but on celebration, a celebration of kindness, respect, and the quiet heroism of everyday life. In the aftermath, the ripples of that quiet afternoon in Pasadena continued to spread, creating lasting change. For General James Miller, the encounter was a turning point. After years of feeling defined by his tremor, of retreating from public life, he felt seen and honored for the totality of his life. Emboldened by the outpouring of support, he became an active volunteer with a local veterans outreach program, his story and his steady, dignified presence inspiring countless others. He was no longer a man hiding his shaking hands. He was a man extending them to help others. Sarah and Leo were gifted a lesson that would shape the rest of their lives. Sarah learned that a child's curiosity is a bridge, not a barrier, and that the best way to handle uncomfortable situations is not with shame, but with an open heart and a willingness to learn. Leo learned that differences are not something to be feared, but stories to be understood, and that true strength can sometimes look like a tremor. Stallone's reputation was subtly but profoundly enhanced. He had always been a symbol of resilience, But this incident revealed a depth of wisdom and compassion that resonated more deeply than any film role. He became a symbol of how to use a platform for good, not through grand gestures, but through quiet, meaningful, human-to-human interaction. The broader lesson for society was clear and resonant. It was a powerful reminder that behind every stranger, there is a story. It highlighted the immense harm caused by turning away in discomfort, and the immense good created by turning towards someone with compassion. The ultimate moral was elegantly simple. The most powerful thing you can do for another person is to honor their story. The shaking hands of a veteran, seen through the eyes of fear and shame, are a source of awkwardness. But seen through the eyes of wisdom and love, they are a testament to a life of courage, a story written on the body itself, a medal of honor that trembles with the weight of a life well lived.